There we go. Okay, there it's rolling. We got to let it breathe just for a moment. Bring on the Facebookers and the Instagrammers here, and we'll get things rolling proper. And we are good. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me is my fellow football priest, who you know, who you love, Zack Kelberman. Zack, we have a few interesting topics to get into tonight. I see already a lot of comments and a couple supers waiting for us, but real fast, first, Zack, I got to get your thoughts on this unfortunate situation that has been recounted by Denver Broncos Hall of Fame running back Terrell Davis, wherein he is calling out a very famous airline for being mistreated. And you had the story for us. Break it down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know really where to unpack this, where to start. This is all according to Terrell Davis on Instagram. He was on a flight over the weekend, United Airlines flight with his family, his wife, and his kids. And he asked. So this is all allegedly, according to Davis again. He asked for a cup of ice for his son, and he tapped the attendant on the arm or somewhere on the body. And the airline attendant exclaimed back, "Don't hit me." And then it kind of escalated from there. And then he was taken off the plane in handcuffs, Chad, and kind of interrogated by airport security and FBI. And it was a pretty harrowing incident that left him, quote, humiliated, embarrassed, powerless, and angry. And he's retained legal counsel, and he's now threatening a course of action against the airline.
Yes, and what's weird about this is it's almost like based on these what has been alleged, it's almost like this flight attendant was just hoping and praying for some kind of physical interaction with Terrell Davis or something. Like maybe they recognized him. Because here's what he said: "Quote during the beverage service," and this is, by the way, Terrell Davis on a flight from Denver to Orange County with his wife, two sons, and daughter. Quote, "During the beverage service, my son politely requested a cup of ice. The flight attendant either didn't hear or ignored his request and continued past our row. I calmly reached behind me and lightly tapped his arm, so it was a man, to get his attention to again ask for a cup of ice for my son. His response and the events that followed should stun all of us. He shouted, 'Don't hit me,' left the cart to hurriedly approach the front of the plane." Davis says he never saw that guy again. That was, as far as he knew, the end of it. The plane lands. The pilot says, "Please stay on, ladies and gentlemen, please stay buckled and in your seats." Next thing he knows, 6 FBI law enforcement agents board the plane. The FBI, quote, "The FBI agents and local authorities proceeded directly to my seat and immediately placed me in handcuffs while seated and without any explanation in front of my wife and children, while the entire flight of passengers watched in silence. I was then removed from the flight while being recorded by multiple passengers as I was paraded off the plane in handcuffs by the officers." Last thing here, he says, quote, "During questioning, it was rightfully determined by the agents that this flight attendant was inaccurate in his accusations, and the agents profusely apologized, even offering to support me and my family in any way possible. I have yet to hear anything from United Airlines," close quote. So you had the synopsis, but how weird is that, Zack, for you touch someone on the elbow, "Excuse me, don't hit me." Next thing you know, you're getting hauled off a plane in handcuffs. I mean, total BS.
It is, and it's weird for sure. But if you've flown recently or you follow the news about airlines and airplanes, it's not all that weird, Chad. It's a troubling time for the commercial airline industry. And I don't know. I mean, we have comments saying he's looking for a lawsuit incoming, and could be going for a payday. It could be an overreaction. It could be a case where the truth. There's both sides and the truth. We don't. This is one recollection. This is Davis's account, and we have no reason to doubt him, Chad. But I'm not all too surprised, given the fact that I was on an airplane recently, that these things are transpiring.
Well, and look, I don't mean to make light of it, but to kind of show how ridiculous it is, I'm like, as soon as I'm reading this, I'm like instantly reminded of the Adam Sandler movie, Anger Management. Like the whole scenario, Zack, that gets him roped into having to be in a court-ordered anger management course, wherein the whole plot unfolds. Very similar, only the difference here is that he calmly asks for a set of headphones so he can plug into the on-flight, movies or whatever. and he keeps getting put off. Finally, the stewardess walks up, flight attendant, whatever. And he just lightly kind of touches her elbow to stop her from walking past him and says it again. And same thing. She freaks out. Next thing he knows, he's getting stunned by a air marshal or something, right? And that's the comedy part of that movie. This is real life. That should not be happening. And look, I get it. If this was, I'm not trying to make light of things, guys, but like if this was Zach 2002 and everyone's still really jumpy about airplanes, not to say we don't take all that stuff serious, but certain things, like there's got to be some more common sense approach to managing incidents like this, incidents in air quotes. I mean, it's not even an incident, but still something to determine it before guys get hauled off planes in handcuffs.
For sure. And what do they say? The truth is stranger than fiction. In this case, it would be definitely true. And, again, with my personal experience, I'm not too surprised given the airline, Chad, but hopefully Davis can get everything sorted out and doesn't come to legal blows.
Indeed. We got the Papa Bear, David McElrath, kicking things off on Super Chat. So good to see you, buddy. Thank you. He says, good evening, Broncos country, Chad, Zach, and Deacon Scott. Hashtag God bless the USA, 12-5, Buckham, MHS for life, Broncos for life, Bo knows, Knicks for 6, believe. Man, I got to get a breath before I start in on the hashtag game because it's strong for David. Thank you, big dog. And yes, God bless the USA, those unfortunate folks who were harmed in the event around former President Donald Trump over the weekend and the man who lost his life. Apparently, Zach, from what I've read, trying to protect his family, which he successfully did, unfortunately, at the cost of his own life. So God bless the USA. It's a tough time, Zach.
It's a tough time for sure. And God bless that man's family. God bless everyone right now. And that's the hashtag there that resonated with me, David, when Chad was reading them off. It's a very harrowing time for our country, and we all need to come together. It's true.
I saw on Twitter this morning as I was perusing a GoFundMe for that man's family, and it was a no-brainer for me. And it has nothing to do with politics. It just has to do with the guy who's out with his family, and that happens to him. I mean, for crying out loud, it's just such a shame and a disgrace. Sam Bam jumping in. Big dog. Much love and respect. Thank you for the generous super. He says, evening, guys. I really hope Bo Nix is the starter going into the start of training camp. He was drafted in the first round for a reason, and I don't think he's Paxton Lynch 2.0. He needs to get the first team reps. Go Broncos. My brother, you are preaching to the choir, preaching to the converted, however you want to say it. Zach and I are sharing a brain with you on that, and it would be a different story altogether, Zach, if we were talking about Bo Nix landing on a roster that is quarterbacked by, Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Drew Brees or a bona fide guy, then, you're going to wait. But we know that's not what's happening at quarterback for the Broncos currently, Zach, when it comes to the veterans.
And I think from day one out of the box, Bo Nix is not Paxton Lynch. They're two different animals. Because what was the concern with Paxton? His work ethic, Chad, as a rookie coming into the NFL, playing too many video games, not keeping his nose in the playbook. We don't have that concern with Bo Nix. He lives and breathes football just like Sean Payton, and his work ethic is not a concern. Lynch was a player like Drew Lock, Chad, who had all the physical talent, but you worried about between the eyeballs, the mental capacities. None of those concerns are present with Bo Nix.
This is true. And that kind of is a nice segue. Thank you again, Sam. Much love and respect, big dog. To the main topic tonight, at least what we titled the episode around. And again, guys, this time of year, we're kind of, this is when Zach and I and all the podcast dudes here at MHH have to get real creative with the topics and the titles, headlines we're going to go with, because there's no news. I mean, Zach, it's one thing. I was lamenting this to Doc Bear, in fact, today in a private conversation. I was like, it's kind of a weird combination of things happening this summer where you have maybe, in the 10 years of MHH's existence, this stretch of the offseason has probably been the slowest, most apathetic from just seeing how a lot of Broncos fans, if you're in the chat with us, guys, it's not you. Okay. But Broncos fans just disengaging out of apathy, right? They're like, hey, wake me up when we got something to talk about relative to, W's in the standings. And on top of that, you've got a head coach, Zach, who's very competent at his job, and he's a good leader. And he says, we're going to conduct ourselves well off the field. B, we don't talk to the press, unless it's sanctioned by the team and you're standing at our podium, you're not talking to the press. That makes for Zach a pretty slow offseason. So that's a long-winded way of me saying some of these headlines at this stretch of the offseason, I mean, we're about a week and some change off from actual training camp. We're digging deep. But in this case, I don't think we're digging too deep because this comes from ESPN's Jeff Legwold, legendary figure as a beat writer in Denver, former president of the Pro Football Writers of America. And he wrote this today, or not today, over the weekend, Zach. I thought it was interesting. He said, quote, according to several pro personnel executives who have evaluated the Broncos quarterbacks, Zach Wilson, the number 2 overall pick by the Jets in 2021, has the liveliest arm and potentially the biggest portfolio of throws he can make. Goes on to say, lastly, he never found his footing in New York, recording a sub-40 QBR in each of his 3 seasons and completing 57% of his passes with 23 tutties and 25 picks, close quote. What do you make of that?
I shake my head because I hear what he could do, what he can do. It's all been hype and potential with Zach Wilson from the day he was drafted, Chad. But I want to see, for lack of a better term, nuts on the table with him. I want to see results. And I'm not wondering about what could he do with the Broncos. I saw what he could do with the Broncos. He threw an interception in a minicamp practice, Chad, where other quarterbacks like Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham were succeeding, or at least moving the offense in those scripted practices. So it's one more person's opinion on Zach Wilson. I guess I respect the pro player or personnel director opinion, but I'm going off the eye test, and the eye test says that Zach Wilson is not very good.
I mean, there's the measurables, there are the traits, Zach, that can be measured, and as Zach, or I guess actually Scott says in our private chat, there's a reason why Zach Wilson went number 2 overall. Just whatever it was, 4 drafts ago, 21, 22, 23, 24. And it's those raw tools. He does have them. Unfortunately, we could sit here, Zach, till the cows come home trying to list all the reasons why it never came together for Zach Wilson, at least up to this point as a pro. Unfortunately, at this stage, he exited the Big Apple. He might as well have had bust tattooed on his forehead. That's what he is right now. And there was a report from, I want to say it was Phil Yates back in June, saying, the Broncos' first focus, I'm paraphrasing him here, is repairing Zach Wilson's confidence. So, Zach, if that's your first focus as a team, I don't know how seriously you can really take him as a viable threat to be QB1. And yet, according to the odds makers, he's second best odds to win the starting job behind only Bo Nix.
I'll repeat something I said probably a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about Zach Wilson. Is this a time when the Broncos should be, investing that energy and those resources into repairing a bust confidence? You
Right.
just drafted a rookie quarterback, number 12 overall, a rookie quarterback who's probably ready to start from day one. That is where all your energy and investment and resources should go, into developing that guy. And if he can't do it to start, then you have a failsafe in Jarrett Stidham. I just think there's not much benefit from the Zach Wilson experiment as there is potential downside.
I mean, you've got a few. I agree with you at the end of the day, Zach. And yet there are things that have been said by Sean Payton that kind of make you go, little bit, but this is pre-draft. Like, it'd be a different animal if we were talking about this as a conversation and the Broncos did the John Elway type thing, didn't take a quarterback in the first round, thinking maybe we'll get cute and find someone in round 2. It's an edge, it's a corner at pick 12, whatever. Then I would be leaning in a lot more to what I'm about to say here, which is quoting Sean Payton. I like his experience. This is what he said in the immediate aftermath of the draft, literally the night of the first round after the draft. Quote, I like Wilson's experience. You can tell he's played. I feel like he has a very live arm strength. He's picking up the offense pretty quickly, yada, yada, et cetera, close quote. And then he goes on to talk about, of course, Zach, that they were happy to bring Zach on board, really liked the opportunity. And despite there being a number of veteran backups that had gone on to sign contracts, which imply the Broncos were kicking tires, looking at things, they saw talent in a player that just 3 years ago was a number 2 overall pick in the draft. We really like his traits. That's all fine and dandy, but you did draft a quarterback in the first round. So I'm with you in that you got to really invest your resources, budget your resources in the guy who has not been damaged yet, who has not soured, who has not proven and shown the league who he is. Zach Wilson, 33 career starts. Sorry, he's shown you who he is. There's always going to be, Zach, that rare exception to the rule that lands, a highly drafted guy, lands in a different place after washing out and just like goes gangbusters. But for the most part, when they tell you who they are, believe them. And the same goes for Jarrett Stidham, washed out of his original spot. He's on his third team. No. The resources and the investment and the energy and all that juice needs to be on your guy, Bo Nix.
A lot of fans, I guess, think that Zach Wilson is going to be Baker Mayfield 2.0, like what you were talking about, a bust that goes on to another location and has success. Baker Mayfield is just a more talented quarterback than Zach Wilson, no matter the locale. And I have to wonder, when you read those quotes, Chad, pre-draft, would those quotes exist? Would Zach Wilson be a Bronco if they knew they would be drafting Bo Nix, if they knew ahead of time it was a sure thing? No. So how much value does Zach Wilson really bring to the table? You're giving up a late round pick swap for a guy that's been written off that could be maybe quarterback 2 at best. Is it worth investing those resources? But I just want to, which it's not, and I just want to put a bow on what you said. We started the conversation with the offseason's going slowly. We can't wait for training camp. This is another example as to why, because we need the action to get here and results on the field to start materializing. I don't care about anonymous quotes or other people's opinion. I want to see these players on the grass.
Let's shift gears. Amen to that. Let's shift gears a little bit here. A couple of reaction comments. Sam saying, whoa, what the WTF? I hope Terrell Davis gets his justice versus the airline. That is ridiculous. Scott recounts a situation happening literally as we speak with his family being stuck in Charlotte for 2 days, thanks to the airline alleged by Terrell Davis. And with that, I want to segue here. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, with great power, as we know, comes great responsibility. And I'm hoping you're keeping that close to your heart, Peter. Okay. And now that Iron Man is no longer with us, you need that guidance. You'll always have that one maxim. With power comes great responsibility. Chad or Zach or both, I got to get your thoughts on this trade. If, when Cortland Sutton holds out, do you reach out to the Ravens for an Isaiah Likely trade? Solves a big need for us and them. Just saying. Zach, your thoughts?
Well, as someone who combed the tight end waiver wire in fantasy, Isaiah Likely is going to be a really good player in Baltimore. I know they have Mark Andrews, but you'd have to convince them to part with an ascending player in Likely, and I don't know how likely that would be. And number 2, Cortland Sutton already technically held out from voluntary practice and then showed up for mandatory. It'd be kind of awkward to end a holdout and then restart one for training camp. I think there's an understanding that he's going to play out on his current contract, the final year of that deal or whatever it is, or he knows he's going to get some sort of guaranteed bonus, some bump up in salary for the 2024 season. I don't see Cortland Sutton holding out, Chad, and I don't see a likely trade being a possibility.
I don't either. Howie frickin' Day jumping in. What's up, big dog? Good to see you. Thank you, bro. He says, if it is truly so close between Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham, why wouldn't you go with the rookie? 5 years in the league, second year in the system, and then the rookie's right behind him. It seems like an easy choice. Bo knows, buck him. Yeah, that's something I've been saying ever since Mike Kliss on the final day, following the final day, Zach, of the offseason training program said that, you know, according to all media observers, Jarrett Stidham, he didn't exactly say had the best offseason, but basically looked like he was the most comfortable and kind of performing, I guess, the smoothest. He did choose his words carefully, although he did say, according to all media, almost all media observers, but it's really true. And I said this in the immediate aftermath when I wrote up the story reacting to that. And then on multiple podcasts since then, Zach, if the margin between those two guys, the separation, even if Stidham's got him by a step by virtue of his full season in the scheme, then the upside of going with him as your starter is very, very low. You might as well err on the side of the guy you just invested in big time in the first round in Bo Nix. So that's something we don't really know. Another thing that, pardon me, Legwell talked about in that same article I referenced from the little bit about Zach Wilson is he emphasized, and it was a good reminder, this sometimes gets lost in the hubbub and the shuffle when, Zach, we have these big tentpole tropes, like an open quarterback competition, but the coaches view the offseason, especially relative to quarterbacks, as install, learn. It's the educational period. And what they're really measuring, of course, they're keeping an eye on performance and execution, Zach, but what they're really investing most of their focus on is, are they picking it up? Teaching emphasis, coaching cues, all those little things, helping them to assimilate things. When the cleats hit the grass on July 26th, that's when the ruthless performance or bust thing comes out in the wash. And that's where I also feel still very confident, Zach, that you'll see the cream rise to the top in the form of Bo Nix.
I agree with both of you here. This is the point that we've been making for a while, Chad, about you got to go with the rookie. Ty goes to the runner in this instance. So you're right, Howie. But I don't think it has to be even that close, Chad. It would have to be a noticeable gap in ability for Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson, I guess, to get the starting nod over Bo Nix. And I'll bring one example to light. And I know it's a little far-fetched because he was a higher round draft pick, but CJ Stroud. He opened up the season as a starter in Houston last year. They had a veteran in Davis Mills who started games, who probably was more ready to play, and let Stroud, who had an inconsistent preseason, kind of marinate. Again, I know he was highly drafted. He was going to start eventually, but they went with the upside, and it paid off for Houston in spades. You got to, if you're the Broncos, you took the half step already by drafting Bo Nix at 12. Now take the other half step forward and commit to him fully as a starter.
Zach, Dan wants to know on Facebook, what GM drafted Zach Wilson? What's his name? And I know that it was the Jets GM, just don't recall who it was. Zach, who was the GM that drafted Zach Wilson?
It was either Joe Douglas or his predecessor was it John Idzik? Or did they have someone after Idzik before Joe Douglas?
Joe Douglas took over in 2019. Let's see. Joe Douglas was, so it was Douglas. It was Joe Douglas.
Yep.
There you have it. There you have it, big dog. Okay. And look, we got Snoopy jumping in here. I need to introduce Zach Wilson to my mom.
Just keep him away from Dove Valley.
Looking for a little meal ticket. Keith Brugman, what's up, bro? So good to see you. Appreciate the support as always and contributing to the conversation. He says, Chad and Zach, you are a representative for the Denver Broncos. How would you sell me on Jarrett Stidham being the starter for week 1? Okay, if I'm really going to steel man this, because to steel man something means you're going to give it every benefit of the doubt and advocate on behalf of. If you're going to straw man something, you're going to do the exact opposite. You're going to take a given assertion and pick it apart, provide all the downside critiques, etc. So if I were to steel man Jarrett Stidham, I would say, hey, a couple things. I'd say, look, this is the guy that has a year with Sean Payton. This is a guy that when Sean Payton signed him, talked about his belief that he is an NFL caliber, starting caliber quarterback. Not only that, but he's technically your highest paid quarterback on the roster. You got to get some kind of return out of that on that investment. And then part of that same steel man argument, Zach, would be the perfunctory. You don't want to throw the rookie in right away. Let the starter take the veteran, I should say, take those initial bullets. Let him kind of get the rookie get a feel for live game speed in the NFL for a little bit, and then you kind of decide when you're going to play Bo Nix. That would be the steel man. None of which, to me, for what it's worth, Zach, it really resonates. To be frank.
Yeah, you said a lot there, what I was going to say. And Keith, my first question for you would be, am I selling you on Stidham because you want Bo Nix to be the starter? And if that's the case, it'd be hard to change your mind because you have the right frame of mind to begin with. But, when you were talking about OTA performances, Chad, in minicamp and who had the best offseason, I don't think best is the right word. I forget. I think it was Kliss who put it that way or whatever. I think the safest is the right word. Jarrett Stidham was the safest of the 3 quarterbacks because the other 2 kind of had red flags for better or for worse. Zach Wilson had that bust label we talked about. He threw a pick in camp. Bo Nix is a rookie, and he's still learning the game and the quickness of the game and all that. Jarrett Stidham was there. He had a year in the system, and he came into year 2, moved the offense down the field in minicamp, and performed it ably. So to sell you on Stidham would be to take the high floor, low ceiling choice until, like Chad said, Bo Nix is ready.
Phil jumping in. Tucson, proven Broncos country, is not a geographic location. It's a state of being, baby. He says, good evening, Chad, Zach, and Deacon Scott. Who do you think will start opposite Patrick Surtain II? Buckham, MHH for life, Broncos for life. If I had to bet, if you were to say bet, I bet like, I wouldn't bet a car payment. I bet like a cup of coffee, Zach, on Riley Moss.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if it were Damari Mathis. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being Levi Wallace, the veteran newcomer. Like, it's hard to say. I think the Broncos want it to be Riley Moss. But at the same time, Zach, this coaching staff gave Damari Mathis the bites at the apple initially last year before he blew it. So maybe he burnt that bridge, or maybe they're going to try and allow him to reset because they saw something in him and he proved to not quite be equal to his opportunity, but maybe now he might be. That kind of thing. But I think it's going to end up being Riley Moss.
Hell, with all the players competing, it could be Chris Abrams-Drain, the rookie, starting opposite Pat Surtain.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, with the influence that Jim Leonard has in the secondary now, I agree with Chad, and I'll say the same thing I would say about Marvin Mims if you ask me who's going to start at receiver. It better be Riley Moss. You traded up and you invested high capital in that player. It better be him now healthy in a year two as the starter opposite PS2.
Taylor jumping in. Good to see you, big dog. Taylor Christensen to say, and thank you for the super. He says, Zach Wilson will be cut. Bo Nix needs the first team reps. Well, it could end up shaking out that way, Taylor. And yes, we agree with you. Bo Nix needs those first team reps. However, when you talk about, okay, who you're going to keep as the backup, the fail-safe, the veteran clip holder guy, the kind of big bro, who's going to big bro Bo Nix, even though he and Wilson are basically the same age. Money kind of factors in depending on how performance pans out this summer. Now, if the performance is kind of neck and neck, you've still got that arm talent thing upside that coaches just kind of lose their minds over a little bit in terms of rationale and arithmetic and roster decisions. Then there's also the fact that his cap number, Wilson's this year, is $2.7 million, Zach, all of which would be dead money if you cut him. So if you cut Zach Wilson at any point post June 1st, which we're well beyond, you're eating $2.7 million. Whereas in the case of Jarrett Stidham, and this is all based on Over the Cap, who is as reliable as it gets, based on Jarrett Stidham's financials, Zach, his cap number, because he got a nice signing bonus last year, is $7 million. If you cut him, you're going to eat $2 million of that in dead money, but you're going to free up $5 million in cap savings. So you could say it would cost you basically twice as much to keep Jarrett Stidham as your quarterback too. So does Zach need to be twice as good as Zach Wilson in order to keep that roster spot?
I mean, in my view, I might be biased or jaded or whatever, but if you cut Zach Wilson and Bo Nix goes on to assume all the first team reps, and because of that, he has a better rookie season, the butterfly effect, it might be money well spent, Chad. That's how I kind of look at it. And you're right, Taylor. I obviously agree with you. Bo needs the first team reps. I don't know, though, that Zach would be cut until sometime in the preseason. I truly think, Chad, that Sean Payton wants to let this play out, the first string, second string quarterback competitions before he makes any sort of transactions like that. By that point, though, sometime late this summer, I just hope that Bo has had enough first team opportunities to assimilate with the offense.
Let's grab a Twitch. We always try to grab a Twitch. Robot of Doom. And guys, tonight we're going to keep it pretty short. When there's stuff happening, we're going to go an hour, right? When there's stuff going on, we're going to go an hour. But based on kind of flow in the chat, based on how much material is there for us to sink our teeth into, that kind of dictates how long we're going to go. We're about a half an hour in. So this is kind of like, for lack of a better term, we'll call it the 2-minute warning. Not literally, but you get my gist. Robot says, if you want my honest opinion, start Bo, let him go through the growing pains. Look at Jordan Love. He kind of stunk at the beginning of the season, and then he started cooking. And we saw what he did to the Cowboys, and he should have beat the Niners. Not saying Bo Nix is going to be Jordan Love, but just let that guy get experience. And he did, Zach, from like basically when the Broncos beat the Packers at the MHH meet and greet last year. That was basically the lowest moment. I mean, from then on out, all of a sudden Jordan Love started playing big boy ball. I'm still not convinced that's the real Jordan Love, to be frank. He had some big moments last year, and I'm not trying to take that away from him. I want to see him do it one more season. I want to see him sustain that momentum, and then I'll be a full believer that Jordan Love is the truth. But what are your thoughts here for Robot of Doom?
I get what Robot's trying to say here, but I think it's a little contradictory because Jordan Love sat behind Aaron Rodgers for a few years. He didn't start right off the bat. I mean, we're both advocating for Bo not to sit behind Jared Stidham or Zach Wilson for any games, let alone a full season or two. And I think we're on the same page, though, that Bo should start from week one. And that's how you grow. You don't grow as a quarterback or any sort of player in the NFL by sitting on the bench and it being told to you or watching it in a classroom or on a whiteboard, Chad. You go and grow by going out there on the field and going through the good and the bad, the ups and the downs. That's what Bo has to do.
And you know what? I kind of bagged John Elway over some old regime comments here and there, but because he did preside over some mystifying decisions, but I'm digressing here. Before he became a GM, and he was just John Elway, the Hall of Fame quarterback, when he was asked, and you can find this on YouTube, guys, you search it, hey, what do you do with the rookie quarterback? Is it best to let him sit and learn, or is it best to have him play? And he said, basically, Zach, you just summarized his take on rookie quarterbacks. The best way to learn is to play. And so if you do have a high investment in a quarterback, then, and that's your philosophy, then you want to get him on the field ASAP. Now, in terms of practical application, putting that philosophy to the test, John Elway got in here as the main football executive, 2011, let the coaching staff kind of talk him into rolling with Kyle Orton to open that first season as the guy. And then when it all came apart, hey, let's try this Tim Tebow guy. Then you go out and you get Peyton Manning. You don't have to worry about young guys for 4 years, basically. Then Paxton Lynch. What was the beginning of the end of Gary Kubiak, the era of him as head coach? It was the butting of the heads. He wasn't a part of that decision as much as he reportedly wanted to be when they drafted Paxton Lynch, and he wanted to go with Trevor Siemian. John Elway wanted him to play Paxton Lynch, and that give and take lasted throughout the season. Gary Kubiak steps down. Cut to the next highest drafted guy, Drew Lock, 2019, second round. He wanted to get him on the field early, but he also hedged by, I guess this would have been before they got Drew Lock anyway, acquiring Joe Flacco. So you've got that veteran. You go back to the arithmetic of Sean Payton. When do you feel comfortable playing a rookie? If you've got a proven guy, you go with the proven guy. If not, it's the rookie first rounder or the highly drafted guy. Well, in John Elway's estimation, he had that guy, he thought, in Joe Flacco. And then when that kind of fell apart and Drew Lock got healthy, it was Drew Lock until Vic Fangio started worrying about his job, right? Then the arithmetic changed. Let's bring in Teddy and all that. So in that sense, I think for the most part, Zach, John Elway stayed true to his pre-GM philosophy of highly drafted young quarterbacks. You got to play them.
Yeah, I want to say something, but it kind of dovetails to Jetty's comment here. Thank you for the super, Jetty, $5. Besides Patrick Mahomes playing behind Alex Smith his first year, do many first-round quarterbacks end up sitting on the bench their first year? Not many. And Chad, do you know why you get a player on the field, quarterback or not? To find out something very simple. Whether they're good or whether they're bad, whether they can play or whether they can, whether they suck or whether they don't. It's the same thing last year with CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, for example. You got them on the field early. You found out one is pretty good and one's not. It's why so many people want to see Trey Lance play out there in Dallas to find out what he can do because the jury's still out, Chad. You don't know that. You don't find that out without getting that player on the field. Look at Jordan Love, who we just talked about. We didn't know up until this past season, and he was drafted a few years ago, whether he can play or not. And only until he got on the field did he prove he can play. So that's why you have to find out with Bo Nix. I think he'll be good. I think he'll be successful, but we don't know until he's on the field taking those live action bullets.
Very, very well said. Thank you, Jetty. Great to see you tonight as well. Appreciate you, big dog. It's true, man. You just gotta, also, I think, trust your evaluation. And a big part of that is, hey, what we scouted on tape as a prospect, are we seeing those things we liked in OTAs? Are we seeing those things we liked come out on the wash in training camp, in the preseason? And if those things are adding up, then you don't waste too much time second guessing it. play the kid, play the guy. And in Sean Payton's case, I think, he's done the right thing in terms of balancing the demands of wanting to play the kid, his handpicked guy, and placating a locker room, maintaining that credibility where he's got to be able to stand up there and say, the guy who practices the hardest, prepares the best, and performs the best is going to be the guy. There's not enough sample size there yet to be able to say that about Bo Nix. So you'll get a couple weeks into camp, a preseason game. I wouldn't be surprised if the decision gets made then. But then again, Zach, it could be the traditional, customary, final preseason game. The starter sits because he was just named the guy for the season, and they let the other two guys battle it out. I'm not sure what to expect on that front, but I think Sean Payton will know probably about first preseason game.
If they take it down to preseason game number 3 and they're splitting reps up until that point, they're just doing Bo Nix a disservice. It's as simple as that, Chad. It really is. And I'll hammer my point home with one final player that we talked about earlier. Paxton Lynch. You drafted him. You didn't know what he was going to be. He was a very, high upside pick at that time. You could have hit him on the bench for 2 years. It would have come out that he was no good when he was finally on the field. So it's why you have to get the player on the field to find out simply whether they can play or not.
This is true. Okay, real quick, guys, before we dip on out of here, I'm going to take one last go around look at the chat to see if there are any topics that we haven't touched on, moving the conversation needle forward a little bit. I think up to this point, though, we've pretty much grabbed everything. And by the way, it was quite clear that was a voice-to-text comment, robot of doom. So you're forgiven. It's all good. We roll with those punches, Okay, good. And you got your Bo Nix, Midnight Blue, dope. Okay, guys. Unless something comes in 11th hour, I think we've touched on all the things. We got a couple of messages for you though first, so don't dip out quite yet.
Tremendous episode, as always, of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle, Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch like we're rocking each and every single podcast, check out mhhmerch.com and get you some. If you haven't done so yet, please drop us a like at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your Football Priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, y'all, please, it's a lot of pleases, subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really, really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
A mile high salute to the great Super Chat superstars and supporters helping us keep the lights on deep into the Broncos summer. We got Sam Bam. Thank you, big dog. We got the Papa Bear, David McElrath. We got Howie frickin' Day, Keith Brugman. Appreciate you, big dog. Phil McLaughlin. We got Taylor Christensen. We got Jetty Splash. Thanks to each and every one of you. And Zach and I, we will be off on the podcast anyway until Thursday. Look forward to seeing you guys then. But plenty of content coming your way here at MHH. Keep it with us every night, 6 p.m. You know this. Love you guys. Have a great week.
Rookie reporting this week, Chad. We're getting closer to training camp. True. Regardless, have a great start to your week. We'll see you Thursday. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.